Okay, this is Gerbil Time 24, and I will be covering the subject of choosing the right habitat. And this is part one in a series. So we'll go over and discuss some quick information on things to look for a good habitat and things to avoid. So the things to look for include good ventilation. So you want to make sure that there's adequate air flow through the enclosure. This prevents things like moisture buildup, as well as just giving your pet the needed air that they need. You want to make sure that it is escape proof. Gerbils can be pretty clever. They're excellent chewers. They're also very agile. They can jump high. So you'll need to make sure that it is escape proof. The other thing to look for is that it cannot be chewed. So make sure that any part of the enclosure cannot be chewed. Make sure that no part of it is plastic. And not only could they chew through it and escape, also if they chew off any plastic pieces, there's always the risk that they'll ingest it. And we would not want that. So another item that you'll want to look for is making sure that it's easy to clean, it's easy to wipe down. If you get something that's not easy to clean and that has lots of nooks and crevices or a texture to it so that it makes it hard to clean, it can make it so that there's germ buildup, for instance, or basically you're not providing a sanitary environment for your pet. The other thing you want to look for is that there's plenty of space. A good rule of thumb is 10 gallons per gerbil at the minimum. So if you had 2 gerbils, which you should never have just one gerbil, they're social creatures, so you need to get at least 2. So if you have 2 gerbils, that would equal 20 gallons at the minimum for your pets. I'll mention that I use a 40-gallon enclosure for my 3 gerbils. I had used a 20-gallon at one time because the Humane Society said that 15 gallons would be enough, so I thought 20 gallons would be plenty for 3. Really, there should be 40 gallons, I would recommend, if you have more than 2. Also, you want to make sure that your enclosure allows room for digging. And terrarium and aquariums are really good for this because it makes it so that when they are digging, they're not tossing out bedding all over your bedroom floor, for instance, or also that they're not pitching seeds that they don't like through the bars, which can happen if you have a barred cage. So that's something that you'll have to be aware of. So just some things to consider. Also, things that you want to avoid. As I said before, you want to avoid plastic. You also want to avoid getting a guinea pig or rabbit metal bar cage because the bars are too wide apart and your gerbil could escape. Also, be aware that you want to make sure that there's not poor ventilation. You want to avoid getting an enclosure that is too small. And also, you just don't want to go cheap. You want to make sure that you get the adequate environment for your pet. Things to remember. Just because the gerbil itself is inexpensive does not mean that their home should be cheap. I always hate when people assign prices to animals and think that, just because your gerbil was $15 at the most, that it's somehow worth less than a more expensive animal. People adopt dogs every day that they did not pay anything for or not much for, and that doesn't value, you can't assign value to an animal, is what I am trying to say. So don't go cheap on their homes, and don't refuse to take them to the vet if they really need it just because they were inexpensive. So another thing to consider is you want to purchase an enclosure that's easy to wipe down and clean, as I said before. I will say typically cages marketed for gerbils and hamsters are not adequate. And it's good to let yourself think outside the box. Be creative. Look at terrariums that you would use for reptiles. Look at aquariums. There's a lot of people on YouTube that have used the Detolf shelf that you can purchase at IKEA, both in the UK and in the United States. That's an option. So there's a lot of different options you can consider. But when you're making your decision, make sure that you consider what kind of lid you are going to use, and if you need to make a lid, how you're going to make it, and also consider how the lid will latch securely. You need to make sure it latches securely because gerbils are smart. They can make sure that they can figure out how to lift it and escape. So make sure that it latches securely, and make sure you take that into consideration.